All right, looks like we're officially live. Welcome to everyone who's joining. Uh, we'll give it another minute or so. I want to be conscious of everyone's time in this Christmas season, and then we'll kick it off. We'll do some intros. We'll talk about what topics we're going to hit today. But yeah, hey to everyone for joining and thanks for being here.
Yeah, folks, feel like it. Tell us where you're joining from in the chat. I'm joining from the Bay Area, East Bay.
I'm in Houston, Texas.
I am in sunny San Diego with an Australian accent, so don't let that get anyone confused out there.
Another San
How,
Diegan.
howdy, San Diego. There we go. Okay. All right, let me get this screen share going while we wait here. Okay. That's showing up for you guys, Ramsey and David. You can see that all right?
Yes,
Thumbs
sir.
Yep.
up. Perfect. All right. Okay, so I think in the interest of everyone's time, we'll go ahead and kick off. This is being recorded anyway for anyone that joins late, so we'll definitely send the recording out. But thank you everyone for joining today's webinar to talk about what's on the title there? Smarter Revenue Insights, AI tools versus Gong and call recorders heading into 2026. We want to, kind of do a deep dive today on all things call recording, Gong, and then other solutions that are out there, and whether this is, the right move for you guys, whether you're on Gong or another type of tool to look at new AI alternatives. So I am Abe Roda, head of sales here at Rumi. Just do a quick round of intros. Let me skip slides here. Yeah, so head of sales here at Rumi, having these types of conversations all day, every day. We've also got Ramsey Pryor, who's the CEO of Rumi. So Ramsey's joining. He'll share firsthand experience as a sales leader of some pretty fast growing companies. And he can talk through today about why his teams in the past have chosen Gong. He's very familiar with Gong and used it quite a lot. And then, why the switch to Rumi and heading up Rumi as the CEO as well. So we'll get some good color and context from Ramsey on that. And then we also have an esteemed guest, David Weiss, here with us. So this intro might take a little longer because he's got some accomplishments here. So bear with me, David, on this one.
I hope you're not reading the full one that Ramsey gave you. You can do the short. You can do the shorter one. I don't need
I'll,
the two paragraphs.
I'll give you some flowers, but maybe I'll keep it a bit briefer. So
Cheers.
David, David has 20 years of experience in B2B sales, including 15 years in senior enterprise and executive selling leadership roles. We're stoked to have you here today, David, to have this conversation. He's known as a top sales voice on LinkedIn. He's worked at organizations like ADP, Outreach.io, and Seismic. One of the foremost experts and teachers of MEDDIC, for those that are familiar with that methodology, or MEDPIC. His current role is the chief services officer at MEDDIC, where he leads the services side of the business, and he's also the founder of DealDoc, and a prolific sales author and advisor, and he's written many guides. I won't list them all out here because we could spend the whole webinar doing that. But uh, great expertise. Again, happy to have you, and thanks for joining, Ramsey and David.
Yep. Thank you both for having me, and thank you for the listeners going through that whole bio. So that'll be the least exciting part of today.
Awesome. All right, let's talk about the structure for today. So, the first part we want to touch on is why now? Why are we having this conversation about Gong? Gong's been around for a long time. Off the bat, I think we want to give a shout out to Gong for sort of paving the way for making call recording in the sales world kind of like the standard. Like you need to have this, right? And they've been at that for a long time and built a tool that has become widely known now. And with the advent of AI and LLMs becoming, the norm over the last, depending on how long you've been following this for, 24 months, it's hit hyperscale over the last, 12 to 18 months. These conversations have started to come up online. Oops, I'll go back to that one. And these are just a couple of snippets of it, right? Like people are exploring out there why are we paying for a tool that we may not be utilizing all of its value? And this is across not just sales recording tools. I think this is across SaaS in general. AI has created things at efficiency now, and that includes the economics of purchasing products like this. But you still need things from these tools, right? And so this is a snippet of people are looking at can we get the same type of tool out there for our sales team? And can we get the things that we need to use that tool for a fraction of the price, which is the topic of today's, conversation. And I think this is going to be fruitful, and I think a lot of people are asking these questions, and that's what, partly what we want to cover today is talk about that. On the docket today. So here's what we're going to cover. Why Gong and call recorders? Why have we chosen those types of tools in the past? And David's going to have some amazing insights into that. Ramsey's going to share his personal story. What are the alternatives? We're obviously coming at this from a Rumi AI lens in full transparency, but there are many out there. What's missing if you go to another alternative? And again, we can talk from a Rumi perspective about does it matter if you miss those things? Who is it for or not for, depending on how much of a tool like Gong you're actually utilizing? And then as we go, Q&A, feel free to use the chat, jump questions, put questions in there, and we'll monitor those, answer those as we go. So don't be shy and jump in there. Awesome. So that's on the docket today. We'll dive in. Whoops, let me go back here. Okay, so let me stop screen sharing. All right, so I'm going to throw it over to David to kick things off here. So, David, as I said, you spent a lot of time in this space. Why, in your opinion, have teams historically purchased a tool like Gong or call recording tools? What is the hope they're trying to get out of a tool like this? The ROI, like the business case for actually doing this and getting your team trained on a tool like this? And adhering and making the most of it. Why has that happened in your experience in the past, and what are teams trying to get out of a tool like that?
Yeah, and a positive shout out, as you mentioned earlier, to Gong. I mean, they created a category. So, amazing job. Nothing here, against that. I think a lot of, our conversation today is like, how has the space evolved and like, how do we extract maximum value, not just, lower cost, but maximum value out of a solution. And in general, what I've seen and kind of the promise of a lot of these call recorders is like, let's, make all of your reps act like your best reps. And, that really does sound great in theory. Like if I can get all of my performers to act like my top performer, like more money, huzzah. And so, I really do like the concept. Where it falls flat is many of these systems just turn into data repositories. So, I connected, I've got 10 reps, I've got 100 reps. Average rep goes on, 5 to 10 plus calls a week. Within, that week, I now have, hundreds, if not thousands of recordings that then cascades across a year. And now I've got, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of recordings. And it's like, great. In the moment, if I'm sitting on a call, I can use for call coaching. If I need to inspect a deal and I need to listen to hours worth of calls, like, yes, I can do that. But the extraction of the data at scale, I think, is where a lot of the value prop has started to fall short with a lot of call recorders, because I've used them all. And honestly, I've been probably recorded almost everything I've said in a professional context for like the last 10 years. So, I mean, that's a lot. But if we were to go back and actually try and extract information out of that, really hard. And when I do that with salespeople and when I coach sales teams, it's really, really hard to get that information. Like Gong and a lot of the other recorders can give top level stuff like talk time and monologues, and some of them can flag, big topic conversations and sentiment. But the problem is I still need to go to that call and read all that stuff or watch the call and digest it. And when I try and do that, and I have as a leader and as a coach at any degree of scale, like the amount of time that that takes is still like really, really like heavy. And like I think that's the part where a lot of them start to like, fall down a little bit is in that.
Yeah, it's a good point. And, talking about, I think the business case of making that decision in your experience as well, David, just to peel that look back a little bit from your perspective, you know, deciding to purchase a tool like Gong back in the day, or even today, there's an expense that comes with it, right? And the business case to doing that. And you can just talk broadly about call recording software, the absence of having something like that, even though you think like, hey, how do I extract all this data? Like you mentioned, the decision to not even have the data there being recorded in case you want to do something with it, and the ROI of like, hey, we got to have this in place. What's been your experience of, not having it versus having it, the business decision to
Yeah.
justify that spend?
I think having it is or not, I think not having it is not even an option these days.
Yeah.
Like let's just take basic, call coaching, or let's just even take the risk of, a he said she said moment between a seller and a buyer. Like you avoid that one time in a deal, you can potentially just like de-risking those types of things. You could probably pay for, a lot of call recorders just in like making sure like what's was said happened. But even significantly deeper than just risk avoidance by recording calls, being able to coach people, help people level up where they need it, help speed up ramp time. Like that's one of the big things I love about call recorders. It's also one of their biggest downfalls. Like so much of them again have unstructured data. So like if I'm ramping up a salesperson and I want to get them really, really good at discovery, cool. Like, do I even have a category of discovery inside my call recorders? And if I do, which discovery calls should I point people at? Like, which ones were objectively, not just by like talk time ratio, because that's not really like the real judge of a good conversation. Like, yes, equal talk time is important in a human to human conversation, but the content of what was discussed and how and questions asked and how deep we, peel to find like pain or metrics or whatnot, like the quality of the conversation is not determined by necessarily talk time. So like, how do I even know, which conversations I should point people at? And so like, yes, justifying ramp time as part of the business case, no brainer. But how do I make sure I actually like can effectively execute that through categorization of types of calls, right calls, things like that. So I think it's really easy. And honestly, I feel like that's why Gong and others have grown so fast. It's very easy to build a business case around ramp time and win rates and deal execution and management and better reps and better training and coaching and all and risk avoidance. It's really easy to build this business case. I think what's harder is once it's implemented, the actual like usage of it and the value extraction of it. And Abe, I think that's all where a lot of the comments you're making is because these like Gong and some others that are like what I consider like tier one from a cost perspective, they charge a lot. It's not cheap, and if you can't extract the full value from it, all it really does turn into is like a repository of data, and it's like okay, like now like we need something, but do we need that? And like that begins to form the question.
Yeah, yeah, it's well said. And you touched on unstructured data there as well. There's unstructured data in meetings as well. We know that it's all unstructured data. But there's unstructured sales data, as we know, in Salesforce, in HubSpot, in Slack, in Google Drive, and across all these tools. So I'll just plant that seed for a later conversation and how we think about all those fragmented data points. But we'll throw up to a poll right now. Thank you for sharing that, David, on your perspective on Gong and why and call recordings, why we use them. If we can get that poll up now for the audience, just to get your perspective on how you're using Gong, why you're using a call recording tool as well. So we'll get that thrown up here. Give a minute or so to fill this out. So reasons for buying or using Gong or call recording. So hopefully that's showing up okay. Can you guys see that, Ramsey and David? You should be able to see it. Perfect. Okay.
Yep.
And
I do
it's,
see it says check all to apply and single choice. Sounds like you can probably just pick one,
yeah.
maybe your top reason.
Oh, it's a single choice. Okay. Thought it was going to be select all those apply. Got it. So once we get this, once everyone's put, and thank you for entering your answers into this as well. Once we get that, we'll see the results. We'll put those up on the screen. Let's see. So the number one, 75% of people to capture notes and help me remember the specifics so I can focus on the conversation. Yeah, it's kind of the baseline fundamental need, right, of having a core recording tool there. Love that. Enables us to be more present as salespeople on the calls as well. 5% or 8% to record and audit my team's calls, and then another 8% to capture what customers are asking us for as well. Yeah, it's a good insight. And it's a good segue over to you, Ramsey. Thank you again for answering it. We'll have another poll coming up shortly as well. But Ramsey, your experience, you've done a lot of leading in sales teams as well. Why was this important for you, having a core recording tool like Gong in the past, to coach and enable and level up your teams? And then why the transition to Rumi?
Yeah, like David, I've used a couple different tools over the last, really going back to 2017 was when I first started using a tool like this. Before that, what I was at a company with about 100 salespeople. And before that, what we were doing is we would try to get two people on every call to do the work that recorders now do. And it didn't even have to be a sales manager, but it was just someone who would observe what happened in the meeting while the other person who's leading it is focused on doing discovery or pitching or whatever it is. There was value to having just another set of eyes that would just tell after the meeting, hey, when they asked this question, I think they were actually asking this other thing, and you said this, but I think they were asking that. Just that kind of feedback is really helpful. And it's impossible, any salesperson, to manage the meeting, to read the room. There's a lot going on. So when we adopted it, it was really that. It was this second set of eyes, and you could even watch your own recording back and learn a lot. You could, as a manager, audit your team's calls and instantly say, hey, here's 3 or 4 things that I think you could do differently or better. And we just embraced that thought. So that's where it started for me. We used Chorus initially, and then we used Gong. And it's funny that David uses the term call recorders. And I think we're using that term because that's really all it was at the beginning, but it can be so much more. And Gong has evolved. A lot of these tools have evolved much beyond just recording and playback. Still, that's the number one use case in my experience and for other sales leaders. There's no substitute for just replaying calls and getting a firsthand sense of, like, are my reps doing a good job of handling certain objections? Where are the relative strengths and weaknesses in the team? And frankly, like, what are customers and prospects saying that we should know about? So that's kind of use case number one for me. But I think I had 3 big problems with Gong and Chorus. Number one, I knew all the information was in there. I never had the time to go and do the forensics and dig it out. And I set 2 hours in my calendar every Friday to go and audit calls, and I would say my adherence to that was abysmal. And I think that when I talk to other people on the team and other companies, same thing. Like, they wish they spent more time. There's this thing called Gong guilt, where you felt like you just weren't using the tool enough because you're too busy. So that was issue number one. Issue number two, I think, was just it felt like it wasn't really built around our particular sales method. And we spent a lot of time with this famous guy in Silicon Valley, Skip Miller, RIP. He did an awesome job training us. And I felt like it wasn't being reinforced, all the great stuff we learned. There was a certain set of things like monologuing and talk time, but what I wanted it to do was to reinforce the literally hundreds of thousands of dollars we'd invested in a sales training program. And then lastly, I just felt like even though when your sales team is doing great and hitting their numbers, you don't need to justify spend too much. But there were a lot of people that frankly didn't have access to data because it was really expensive on a per person basis. I wanted our product team in there. I wanted our C-suite in there, and that was just out of the cards. So when I joined Rumi and we started talking about the gaps we wanted to fill, we thought about those things and doing the 80%, for quite a lot less money. But also, we're born as an AI native company. We're like, we have all of this incredible data. Like, how do we use this data to just eliminate admin time so that AEs have more time selling? How do we make it proactive instead of waiting for people to come back to us and ask us questions? Just things like that. Because we have all the data and we're in a new era, we thought like, let's just think about this from a completely different lens.
And talking about like, I think you're touching on the same points as David touched on there, which is, for underutilization of these tools, if there's a higher price tag on it, this is, I think, where people are considering what are the alternatives, right? Like if you're someone that uses, to your point, Ramsey, like all the bells and whistles, and I think there was a question as well about, using a lot of the features and how to get like enabled on all these features. I think if you're a company that uses 100 of the 100 bells and whistles that are out there in a tool like this, then that's credit to you. And that's fantastic. That means you've got a great process in place. You've got great enablement. You've got great, CS guidance from your team or leadership. Then, that seems like a good solution. If you're not getting the utilization, that's what we're talking about. If you're using 5 or 10 of the bells and whistles out of 100, then let's start to explore alternatives, and that's what we're seeing in the marketplace as well. And then a part of that comes down to, what of that is tech enabled, and then what of that is, comes down to people and training. And David, in your experience, what challenges do you see between like the tech enabling people and being intuitive enough to just get full adoption of the things that your organization needs, from visibility standpoint, and then what comes down to people and how do you deal with those challenges, or what are the main challenges in that space?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it often comes down to two things. It's like deal management and
Yeah.
then the deeper levels of deal execution. So when I say deal management, what I'm really thinking about is, across your entire deal, how am I figuring out where I have risk and the plays and actions that I need to take? And then deal execution is more like in the moment type stuff where I'm having when I'm having like a discovery call or a demo. How am I breaking down like the pieces of that conversation? Like in discovery, like how am I breaking down, the initial rapport building and then agenda setting and mutual agenda and then, pain-based questioning that needs to like, go through multiple levels of like, why is this to get to a metric and an outcome? And then how well do I like connect that to the problem I solve? And then how well do I, help the buyer understand the journey that we're going to go on and the next steps that need to be taken and booking those next steps? Like, a discovery call is that. A demo can follow a different but conceptually from like a building blocks perspective flow. Like how well am I executing every little piece there? And then like then more broadly as a deal, like where do I see risk and actions I need to take? Where I'm seeing more advanced call recorders and in general, just like the space going is really in those two camps. It's how do I identify risk so I can take action, really aligned to both deal management, win rates, forecast accuracy, but then also like how do I up level my team inside of like the critical components of every single call so they can then like put that like entire puzzle back together and just like run better deals. Getting like insight into where I have risk so I can do that and where my team has gaps inside the execution of how they're supposed to be doing things. Like those are the two areas where like to me there's a lot of value extraction that can still take place.
Yeah. And I think those two areas, well, we should ask the audience actually where you guys are getting, the value from. What are the kind of must-have features? I think if we get the next poll put up on the screen as well here, it'd be interesting to hear from the audience. What are some of the challenges that you guys experience with Gong? And let's see. Okay, yeah. So we got four options there, or another, and specify on the other category. But be interesting to hear whether it is the people problem, and enabling people to use all those tools like deal insights, like you mentioned, David, or adherence to sales methodology, and where are gaps happening in that space. Is it just underutilization in general? Is it just flat out this is too expensive and we don't want to pay for this tool anymore? Um, or is it something else, right? It could be something else. And every sales team has a different need and a different flow, different cadence and structure. So curious to hear from the audience what that is for you.
And maybe if it is one of the other things that you can throw it in the chat, might be a good way to tee up, make this a little more interactive.
Yeah, I love to hear from the audience and like Abe, I think one of the other things that you asked was like around just broadly where you still need humans, and I think where I feel like there's still a lot of gaps is just like in the aggregation and synthesizing of those key areas. Like where do the trends exist beyond like a single call or a team of calls, like across the business, where do we need to improve? And like some of that stuff I feel like we don't have clear insight.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I'll throw to Ramsey for that. But just to quickly read out the poll results. So, do you guys see the poll results, or do I need to read them out? Do you see them?
I can see them, but I don't know if
Oh, okay, yeah, you can see them. Yeah, so 86% of people on underutilization, and that kind of echoes the sentiment of why we're having this conversation now in the first place. And for the 14% that are fully utilizing it, or something else, then shout out to you again for enabling a tool like this. But yeah, where there is underutilization, that is where we would say a tool like what we offer can drive value, and especially around connecting those pieces, David, that you mentioned. So Ramsey, I'll throw to you, and we can kind of start to explore. What I'd like to do now is explore, the areas, the most common use cases that we see for underutilization. There is still utilization for a tool like Gong and a call recording, and it might be five really common things, right? And I'll throw to you, Ramsey, to talk about what those are. And talk through that. And then, perhaps after that, we can dive into the different points of unstructured data across different fragmented tools and how we think about helping companies connect those data points and bringing that data to you as opposed to you going to look for it.
Yeah. And I think so, David, what David was talking about, I think, is really from the perspective of a sales manager. It's sort of like, where are the risks in my team's deals? How do I spot those and how do I coach those? And then on the other side of the coin, there's how do AEs and SDRs and practitioners use a tool like this, and how can it be helpful to them? So I think let's break it in those two pieces, and maybe I can address those, and love to hear your thoughts, David, and anybody else too in the chat. But from a sales leadership perspective and finding risk, when every sales team is different, their risk they're looking for is different. So step one for me is being able to just ask the sales leader, what is the risk that you want to listen for? And how do you want to be notified? And one of the biggest challenges and the things that we've thought about is in Rumi is I don't want to wait for a sales manager to have that Friday to go into my dashboard and then start looking for the risk. What I want is for them to say, anytime this thing happens, I want you to notify me. And in that moment, I want to go replay that call, and not all of it, but just part of it. And then I want to use that as a teaching moment. And that's, I think, the best thing that you can do as a sales leader is give timely instruction. And also, like, the challenge I often had was we always felt like we've got this big team. We can't fill their heads with 100 thoughts. Let's give them exactly one thing to think about and work on. And in a very obtuse way, you could say, okay, this month, the whole team, we're going to say, we want you to go wider. So like if you have 3 contracts in every opportunity, we want you to have 6. And that's one way to approach it, and you can approach it broadly. But I think that with AI, you can get more specific, and you can say, actually, Abe doesn't need to go wider. He already does that. What I need Abe to do is this other thing. And so I think what we've tried to engineer here is the ability to say a little more sort of greater sort of acuity, so that like I don't have to treat every salesperson as the same. I know what their strengths and weaknesses are, and I want to be alerted when Abe forgets to set the next meeting before the end of his call. He's a relatively new employee, but someone who's super senior, I'm coaching them on something else, and I want to know, is the coaching that I've been giving them taking effect or not? So I think that's the next level of what we're trying to build into that intelligence for sales leaders. And for the AEs, I still think the number one thing you can tell an AE is, like, we have the data to get all of the non-revenue generating activities off your plate. You don't have to spend 2 hours at the end of every day, or have me chase you for sales updates and my manager chase you for sales updates too. All that information exists. So how about we just feed your up level, and we feed your CRM with the data that it needs so you can get back to working. And when we talk to leaders and AEs, they're spending like a half a day a week, sometimes one day a week, just on that stuff. So what we're trying to do is give them more time to do what they are good at, and give sales leaders, the information they need on a per rep basis. And for everybody, we're trying to give that to them where they work. We don't want to make them come back to another dashboard, another source of truth. If you work in Slack all day, then ask Slack via Slack what you want to know. If you're in Salesforce all day, then fine. Like that's where you go for the data. What we're going to do though is we're going to refine that data and give you the information you need.
Love that. Anything to add on that? Thank you, Ramsey. David, from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, what you're hitting on is one of I think the biggest challenges I see in a lot of the call recorders is like this, and I was talking about it earlier. It's the difference between, reactivity versus proactivity. It's if I need to go into a system, look at a bunch of scorecards or look at a bunch of data, try and figure out which calls I should listen to, try and understand and make sense of it. It's a lot of time. If I can have, as a leader, if I can have the insights I need pushed to me, like, and not saying that salespeople, ever lie or change the narrative, but I've been in cases where I've asked people like, critical information about deals or forecasts or things like that. And how it was explained to me versus, when I went and listened to the call, weren't always 100% congruent. And it's like that delayed us because sometimes, people don't want to share bad news or their perspective of it. If I can get that information like, oh my God, we have these deals in commit, we need them by the end of the year, this is conversations that just happened in real time, here was like an objection, a red flag, a something. If I can have that pushed to me like right away, where then I can go listen to the actual call or the snippet and then go have the conversation that needs to be had, like that can literally make the difference between hitting a number and not. So like those types of things from a leadership perspective, like that proactivity of like, let's actually look at it and push what's needed it would be, huge for me as a leader. And then Ramsey, everything you said as a seller, just like purely saving time to make sure the right things are in the right places and I get the notes I need and can prep and all that stuff. Like, yeah, that's awesome.
So much of my time in pipeline calls is really spent like tapping on deals and looking for the weak spot.
Yeah.
And that takes up the vast majority of the call. I feel like there's a natural tendency for reps to want to kind of hide the weak spot of the deal, not expose it. And if you can sort of use AI to before that call say, here's all the deals I care about, here are the weak spots. Then you can spend all that actual meeting time talking about, hey, in this deal, it looks like maybe our champion left, or do we really have a champion, or have we really quantified the business case yet? Whatever your methodology, let's just cut to the chase and focus
Yeah.
on that instead of the
Do we
dance.
actually really understand the decision process? Have the right stakeholders, signed off on the deal? To your point, do we have the right business case attached to the right problem? Like, are we leading when it comes to decision criteria? Are we vendor of choice? Like, I kind of want to know those things, especially if I'm, forecasting a deal. Yeah.
Yeah, so much of the time is getting to the truth, right?
Yeah, getting to the truth and getting to the needed data. Like I've sat on one of the things I do for I was gonna say for fun, but I kind of do it for fun, is I audit forecast calls. And I just love like listening to the things that people talk about. And when I see deals slip, in the vast majority of the time, it's because people didn't actually understand the decision process. This seems really basic, but like I sent you an agreement. You're like, yeah, I'll get back to you, in a few weeks. You ask like, hey, what's the typical process? They say, oh, it can take, 2 weeks to 2 months. And you're like, okay, well, we really need it by the end of the year. Like that's not understanding decision process. That's not shaping decision process. That's not coming to any sort of real agreement. That's like I'm making a lot of assumptions and hoping that things happen and when the timeline they will. And it's like I want to know that conversation took place and how how the buyer and seller reacted in that moment. So I can go back and be as maybe as an executive sponsor and like come over the top of something and be like, hold on a second. This is what was said. This is what we heard. Like, can we please like isolate that? Like it's just stuff like that. Like getting intelligence out of like those nuanced conversations is huge.
And I think that's one of the big questions in my experience of having these conversations of people, prospecting calls and discovery calls and demo calls. For people that are considering a different tool than a Gong out there, the quote unquote fear that I hear over and over again is, well, I want to make sure that I'm not missing out on anything that I'm currently utilizing Gong for, right? And that might be what you just mentioned, David, which is how do I, and Ramsey, how do I identify the gaps? Because I do look at deal insights inside of Gong, right? And I get, risk alerts and things of that nature. So we do that too, right? AI tools can do that too pretty easily and can surface that up for you, right? Or how do I make sure that, my reps are doing a contextualized follow-up really quickly after the meeting, and they extract the key next steps or the pain points or the needs of that rep and sending of that customer and sending a quick email follow-up, right? We do that also, right? So, and to Olivia's question in the chat, she had some couple of good questions to Olivia Radcliffe. Thank you for those questions. Where is your strength and why versus Gong? It's we've just gone through onboarding a large software company, and it's probably a segue to share my screen on this, but they wanted to build out a business case, so they were using about five mainly features within their Gong platform, and their story was, well, they need it for call recording. They need it to be able to look at deal insights. They need to be able to ask questions of past meetings and help prep for upcoming meetings. They needed it to be able to um, connect with their CRM and help with Salesforce hygiene. And they wanted to be able to share these insights more broadly with their team, right? And of course, the big overarching one was they needed to save money. They wanted to get a more effective, sorry, a more economic tool in their hands. So I won't read through all these, but you can see here that this was the numbers that they came up with. They told us, hey, here's the amount of account executives we have, here's how many meetings they're having, here's the admin reduction that they're going to use with us or get with us, and here's how much they're going to save just by moving that amount of people over to our tool versus Gong, right? So I think being able to check off the boxes of the things that you need and save money is sort of the argument that we're in, and the stance that we have. And I think beyond that, it's connecting these fragmented tools across Slack, across Google Drive, across Salesforce, across CRMs, across your development team. Ramsey, maybe you want to touch on that a little bit. A lot of sellers are collaborating with solution engineers or with the development team, and trying to get answers quickly to get back to the customer, right? How can that be streamlined with, connecting different tools? And maybe you can talk a little bit about X-ray and how we think about that.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is when you're working on a deal, of course you have a lot of meetings in person, on Zoom or wherever you meet, but you're also talking to your solutions engineering team on Slack, and maybe you're logging tickets as you're going through a pilot in a ticketing system. The complete source of truth of that deal lives across five or six different sources. And we recognize that. So one of the big differences, we're not just sort of giving you insight into meeting data. We're scanning, and that's why we call it X-ray. We're scanning all those other sources where deal information lives. And if you live in Slack and you want to know what's going on with the deal, or your manager or even your CEO wants to know what's going on with that deal, they can drop into that Slack channel and just say /Rumi, what's going on with this deal? What are the next steps? What are the risks? That's where they work. The information's there and they get their answer. That's a lot easier than someone remembering to go to another system and digging through a new interface and trying to find the information. And by the way, that information is only based on meeting information. But really there's been 5 chats just today in Slack with the customer and with your backend team. So that's one of the biggest differences.
And how do people do that from a customer standpoint? So you've already onboarded the customer. That linkage between understanding and getting customer insights, and for account managers, thinking about it from that perspective. David, maybe you could talk about, like, I don't know how closely you're interfacing in, the account manager role as well, but keeping your finger on the pulse. There's meetings that happen on Zoom or Team or Google Meet. There's, I don't know, depending on the country, there's WhatsApp messages, there's text messages, there is Slack messages that people communicate in, Zendesk, go down the list, right? Like, how do you kind of think about managing that from a centralized standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to it like my role as leading services for us, I spend a lot of time interfacing with our customer team and success and service and sales. And so for me, I don't actually have a ton of visibility into every sales call because I'm not on every sales call. I'm just on the ones that I get invited to and that they have needed on. And same thing with, any of our, customer success value team calls. And so I'm out of the loop around a lot of what happens in these conversations. And what I need to do is I need to like start a Slack channel called like, customer name and then like invite everyone to it and then like, hey, what's going on here? What are we doing here? What was the last? Where's risk? Blah blah blah. And I need to now ask it a lot of questions. If there was a way that I can just be like, hey, what's going on with this deal, and like it aggregate all of these different data points into like something I can query and talk to, like that brings a tremendous amount of value.
What was that Harvard study, Ramsey, that spoke about how many meetings SaaS companies remote? It just happened earlier this year. It was the biggest one that they had done, and it was how many meetings were unnecessary or internally at companies. And it's trying to figure out how many people are having meetings about meetings, right?
Yeah.
I think something like a third of meetings, wasn't it? And I think this kind of the genesis, the reason behind X-Ray is what David just said is why am I going to this rep to get this answer and then to that dev person to get that answer and then to look over here in Slack to find what the customer said and then go look in Salesforce to find out what the latest call note was and then going to look over there. That's kind of the reason right behind it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's two
how many
thirds of all
meetings?
meetings are spent recapping information that's been discussed in another meeting. But by the way, like if it were only in meetings, that would be one thing. But it's all day, all night in Slack, in countless other tools. There's too much information for anybody to stay up to date on. So we use meetings just to basically try to get on the same page all the time. And it's not very efficient. It's not accurate. People put their own filters and their stories on top of the data.
Yeah, I'm not saying this has ever happened, but I've worked places where we have a conversation about something, and then a week later we go for an update, and they're like, "Oh, what did we agree to, last time?" And it's like, yeah, it'd be nice if we could avoid, those types of things and like actually follow through on what we agree. And so like that right there, I like wasted meeting. And I would argue 50-60% of all internal meetings are probably a waste, but the 30% seems like someone was being, friendly with the data. But anyways, yeah.
I relate deeply to that also, David. Yeah, I think Rumi's
Yeah.
been extremely helpful in helping get better visibility across things inside of Slack, or that's where we work a lot as well. So I'll throw to I'm just going to put this slide up for questions. So feel free to throw any questions out there for those in the chat. Anything else while we wait or hear any questions in the chat? Is there anything else, Ramsey or David, that you wanted to bring up on this topic, or anything else we missed before we kind of go into the closing comments?
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to mention while questions are coming in is one of the biggest problems that I've had on every sales team ever is CRM hygiene. And as a sales leader, I'm always telling people, did you update Salesforce? Is the information up to date? You're pulling information out of that, reports, et cetera. That's another thing that really should be part of the past. All the data is there. We map to custom objects, not just standard objects. And we can push, of course, summaries in there, but if in the case of the customer you just brought up, they created a field that no other company has that they want that information that we detect put into those fields every time. It's almost impossible to get compliance on something like that at scale. AI can get that every time, but that's just one of the many things. The death by a thousand cuts that sales teams, you're tired of asking your team to do it. They're tired of hearing it, and AI can completely eliminate that kind of problem.
Yeah, I'd love $10 for every time I've asked the question, how much of a pain point is Salesforce hygiene or CRM hygiene in general for your team? And you just get the nodding. Yeah, it's certainly not perfect over here from the team. And but yeah, being able to everyone has a different way in which they do that too. So I would say, this is a good segue into Olivia's question around customer success and how do we enable teams to get that flow into their CRM in the right format? Do they want really, TLDR summaries to go in there? Do they want one sentence next steps with a date associated with it on when the meeting happened? Do they want more, a broader context on the next steps with more context because that's all that leadership looks at? We can do all that and kind of customize all that specific to your CRM flow, whether it is HubSpot or Salesforce are the main two that we work with. And Olivia, to kind of read out your other question as well. Let's see. Given the pace of AI capabilities is changing so quickly and increasing in good quality, the challenge for the RevOps and commercial enablement team is to embed the capability seamlessly for managers and reps into their day-to-day. Can you tell us more about your customer success setup throughout the relationship? Ramsey, over to you.
Yeah, every single team does this in a different way, and that's part of the challenge. Everybody's Salesforce or HubSpot instance is different. Everybody's process and flow is different. So what we've designed with Rumi, and this is a lot in X-Ray, is just in the way that once you are used to using a tool like ChatGPT and you finally get the level of detail that works for you, and then you can save that and repeat it. We've built that same thing into our processes and into our tools. If there's a certain type of level of detail that your success team has dialed in and wants every time, and they want it in Slack and they want it in Salesforce, then you can dial that in. And once it's dialed, then that's what flows. And if that changes, you can change it. If the sales development team needs a different view, then set up the different view. Everybody can get the filter and the detail that they want. And that's really what we've designed into X-Ray. What's super important is continuity. And as we all know, even if we're an AE or a sales development person, in the ideal world, you want the first touch through closing of the deal to post, success. You want continuity and be able to go back and hear what they were talking about before the deal even closed, and vice versa. And so all the information is always there together in the database. And then you can choose what part of that data to extract, put in your system of record. Maybe that feeds a downstream system you're working on. We store the data, but you decide, where you want it and what the format and the detail looks like.
And Olivia, thanks, Ramsey and Olivia, to the customer success setup throughout the relationship as well. Just to double click on that, so you'll of course get a dedicated customer success manager from Rumi with us, and I would say that is a strength of ours. We've had customers move from other tools over to us and be blown away with how dynamic our support is, our onboarding is. I'm obviously biased on that, but we're not as big as Gong. I mean, the hat's out of the bag. We're not as big as Gong. We work extremely dynamically with our customers to enable success. It's a benefit for us, of course. The more you love us, the stickier the product is, the more value you get out of it. So yeah, if that's something that you're focused on, Olivia, that's a strength of ours for sure. Good question. So we're coming up on time here. David, is there anything you missed that you wanted to get across, or any points you wanted to bring up here?
No, nothing from my end. Just definitely appreciate you all having me, and appreciate the time of the attendees.
Thank you so much for being here, David, and it's been great to have your insights into this conversation. Ramsey, any final thoughts or comments from you?
Only that I know it's a time when everybody's reevaluating their tool set, especially ones that are quite expensive and have long life cycles. So I think what I'd just like to express is my empathy for that situation. I think we're all getting bombarded by a completely new era of tools in every category. What my commitment is to everybody is that we're not trying to lock you into our dashboard, our way of thinking about sales, or our contracts. We're not trying to lock you in for the next 3 years. So if this is of interest, we do invite everybody to come and check it out. We'll go deep with your particular use case, the way you sell, the tools and methodologies you use. and we'll give you an accurate view of what we can and can't do based on that set of circumstances. Then you can make the decision.
And in terms of next steps, that QR code on the screen there is my meeting calendar. So if you do want to dive deeper and explore this further, we do no risk pilots. So I think we have a couple of or a little bit of capacity at the end of this year, and then we're filling up fast early next year. So every solution is custom in terms of the CRM integration. I'll say that again. But getting off the ground and getting a trial going, a pilot going, proof of value is really easy. And I'd love to explore and have that conversation with you guys. So feel free to grab our emails, reach out to David if you want medic advice, reach out to Ramsey if you want to go straight to the top dog. If you want to get a deeper dive and demo, feel free to connect with me. But thank you again, and appreciate your time and joining. And hopefully this was a fruitful conversation, and happy holidays to everyone.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.